Hello, Rama Pupodu. Hope all are in good health, feeling great, wonderful, having a happy and wonderful life. Now let's go to chapter 44, part 3, Kasaragod. The foregoing chapters of this narrative has been written some years ago. To bring the narration up to date, the account that follows is now appended to it. It is also intended to make this supplement as brief as possible by going over only the most outstanding features of Ramdas' later experiences. Life at Anand Ashram, Kasaragod, was also filled with events which are worthy and chronicle. The earlier part of it ran on smoothly except for the crowds of visitors who assembled in the ashram either for performing bhajan or listening to the talks of Ramdas. Then commenced a period marked by celebrations during which singing of the Lord's name and glories went on continuously for 24 hours, attended by hundreds of devotees of Kasaragod. Spiritual aspirants, young and old, had recourse to the ashram. Of these, mention may be made of a few who were, as it were, whole-time sadhakas, because they remained in the ashram during night as well. Ramnath Kini, Kanda, Pura Anand, and Krishnappa were the principal aspirants. Ramnath Kini was a young man who possessed not only a steadfast devotion to God but also a spirit of dispassion towards the pleasures of the world. Krishnappa was also a remarkably earnest and enthusiastic devotee. Kanda and Pura Anand were of advanced age. They devoted their time mostly in taking part in the bhajan and repetition of God's name. They were one and all exceedingly kind and loving towards Ramdas. Ramdas' daily food, which consisted of a small quantity of boiled rice, milk, and curry in the afternoons and fruit and milk in the night, was provided by Anand Rao. Although he lived in a quiet and out-of-the-way retreat, he was kept engaged in talks, correspondence, and other activities till late in the night. Now a few main incidents during his stay in the ashram will be recounted here. Krishnabai, whose life in some detail had already been written and published in a booklet, visited the ashram in the company of some other ladies. From that time, her attraction for the ashram and Ramdas grew in intensity until at last she dedicated her life to the service of God and became a prominent co-worker with him. Her radiant personality, the selfless and silent service she rendered in the ashram, her pure overflow of love towards all alike, shone out of her and revealed her inherent greatness. She met with innumerable persecutions when she was thus walking heart and soul along the divine path. But all through it, she maintained her cheerful and patient nature untouched and unruffled. Those aspiring souls who came under the influence of her dazzling purity were redeemed. Ramabai, Ramdas' daughter by old birth, which with her husband was one of the constant visitors of the ashram. As she imbibed the discourses of Ramdas on devotion, during which he spoke also impressively on Vairagya, the girl's mind turned away from the world, awakening in her heart a deep love and longing for God. Thenceforth, she appeared to have been caught in the grip of a severe mental struggle. She lost all taste for the things in the world. She curtailed her domestic activities, reduced her food, and finally gave up all interest and attachment to her house and became absorbed in God thought. This state of things naturally frightened her husband and others in the house. Her one cry to Ramdas was, "Make me love God." Thus continued some months. However, after a great deal of persuasion by him, she came around and lived a normal life, of course without detriment to her love and devotion to God. About this time, Mother Rukmabai, although she was ailing due to the chronic attack of asthma, came to stay with him at the ashram. The aspirants and devotees, and principally Krishna Boy, served and attended on her with great love and reverence. She bore bravely the discomforts of the ashram life. However, at the pressure of Ramdas, she went back to live with her daughter, coming to stay in the ashram off and on. Soon after the ashram was started, two young women, school mistresses of Kasaragod, became regular visitors to the ashram. Both of them were unmarried, but they were real spiritual aspirants. Their purity and nobility of character shone on their faces. They got instructions from Ramdas regarding the methods for repetition of name and meditation. With earnestness and zeal, they acted upon these instructions. One day, both of them questioned him whether a woman can maintain brahmacharya all her life. Ramdas replied, "Certainly." At this, they were highly pleased. They put themselves under strict discipline, started evening bhajan at home, regulated diet, and thus led an austere and chaste life. Blessed mothers, may the light of God ever illumine your heart and all the ways of your lives. Through correspondence, Ramdas was in touch with innumerable devotees in various parts of India. A year must have passed away in the ashram, and these distant friends longed to see Ramdas again. Letters commenced to pour in from all parts, appealing for him to leave the ashram and start on another tour. Since he had no command from Ram to go from the ashram, he stuck on to it. Efforts through correspondence having failed, the Friends of Maharashtra deputed Janatan Pant to visit the ashram in person to persuade Ramdas to go over to them under his escort. Janatan Pant and Sri Krishna Deshpande arrived. Their advent yielded immense joy to the devotees of Kasaragod. Janatan Pant performed the kirtan at which hundreds of them assembled, but in spite of Janatan Pant's assiduous attempts to induce Ramdas to start with him on a tour, he had to turn down his proposal. He had not at the time the least inclination to respond to his loving invitation. It was all so willed by God. Janatan Pant's disappointment was indeed great, and at the time of his departure he was moved to tears and exclaimed, "What message can I carry to the devotees of Sholapur, who are so eagerly expecting of your darshan?" Ramdas had nothing to say in reply except to request him to convey to the devotees his appeal, that they should not cease repeating the Lord's name and from feeling that Ramdas was ever with them. Janatan Pant and Sri Krishna Deshpande left. Among the saints who visited the ashram and gave Ramdas the joy of their satsang were Swami Pranava Anand, Swami Anandashram and Dwargadas. Swami Parama Anand, an elderly sannyasi, was a great and noble soul. At the very sight of Ramdas, he conceived a love for him which can only be compared to the love of a mother for a child. His stay was very short, being only for a day. In the night, he would join Ramdas when he danced in ecstasy, taking the Lord's name. The Swami, at the request of the devotees of Kasaragod, delivered a discourse on the tennis ground near the Munsif court. At the Swami's pressure, Ramdas was made to fill the president's chair. After his discourse, Ramdas spoke a few words on the unity of religions. Shortly after, Swami Anandashram, the religious head of the Saraswat community, arrived at Kasaragod and took his residence in the precincts of the Sri Pandurang temple. Of course, the members of the Saraswat community went in large numbers for his darshan. At the repeated pressure of a friend among them, Ramdas was also taken over to him for darshan. Ramdas was made to take his seat opposite to him in an armchair in a small room on the upstairs of a house. The elite of the community had also assembled at the place. Ramdas duly honoring the Swamiji with salutation, took his seat. At the first glance, he discovered that the Swamiji to be a pure and great soul. His handsome features radiated a marked glow of spiritual light. Ramdas felt perfectly free and blissful in his company. Without ceremony, Ramdas started recounting to him the incidents of his trips to Kashmir and Amarnath. In a few words, he discoursed about the Siddhanta of Kashmiris, that is, of Shiva and Sakti. Soon after, Ramdas, taking leave of the Swamiji, returned to the ashram. A few days later, the Swamiji, in company with his disciples, paid a visit to Anandashram. The occasion was characteristic of his broad-mindedness and kind and affable nature. After spending an hour or thereabout in Ramdas' company, during which Ramdas alone spoke a few words on the value of solitude and satsang, the Swamiji left the ashram and went back to the temple. Durgadas' stay in the ashram extended over 2 months. While he was a devout and pure soul by nature, he was given to smoking ganja. The intoxication of this drug would unsettle his mind and turn him into a frantic and irritable man. He carried with him a few small brass images of God for his daily worship. He was performing the daily worship after bath on the front veranda of the ashram. About this time, Mark Sanjeev Rao was coming to the ashram for the nights. One day, Ramdas was called away at Ramabai's house for attending their bhajan. In the ashram, there were Ramnath Kini, Mark Sanjeev Rao, Dwarkadas, and two other devotees. After the bhajan was over, Ramdas returned to the ashram at about 9 o'clock in the night. Meanwhile, something had happened in the ashram. Dwarkadas was found to be sitting in a corner with a wry face, nursing his knee joint. The tail came out. When Ramdas was away, there was a friendly scuffle between Dwarkadas and Ramnath Kini, in the course of which Dwarkadas tumbled down from the veranda, his knee striking hard on the floor of the yard. He was fretting and grumbling over the accident. Ramdas consoled him. It must be related in this connection that Mark Sanjeev Rao was an early sleeper. He would therefore insist upon all members in the ashram to go to bed early, so by 10 o'clock all retired to sleep. It might be about 11 o'clock when a loud grunting noise proceeded from the direction of Dwarkadas, which awakened the sleepers. Mark Sanjeev Rao was the first to cry out. Rubbing his eyes, he lifted up his head from the pillow and inquired what the row was about. Ramnath Kini from outside enlightened Mark Sanjeev Rao with the information that Dwarkadas was the cause of the disturbance. Now, Ramdas, drawing the attention of Dwarkadas, asked him what the matter was. He replied, I just now remembered my dead father and as a result of it could not help weeping over his separation. Sanjeev Rao assured him that he would meet him some day and everything would be all right and that he might for the present sleep the matter off. For a time there was a lull and Sanjeev Rao and others entered again into the depths of sleep. Not many minutes has passed before a piercing yell startled Sanjeev Rao and others. This time, Sanjeev Rao shot out of the bed and going up to the dimly burning lantern, turned up its light and arming himself with the lantern directly made for the place where Dwarkadas was sleeping. All the time he was muttering, Let us lay the ghost once for all. The devil is at its trick again. We shall find out what the matter with him is. He held the lantern before Dwarkadas' face and allowing its full glare to fall upon him. What is wrong with you? He bellowed. The reply came, I want to attend the first call of nature. Why don't you? Anxiously asked Sanjeev Rao. By this time, Ramdas was also standing beside Sanjeev Rao. Look here. Have you no eyes to see? My knee joint has swollen and I cannot walk. He replied, pointing to his knee on which there had appeared a protrusion as big as a tennis ball. Mark Sanjeev Rao was a man of tact and resource. He called Kanda and Ramnath Kini for help. Dwarkadas, on account of his incessant addiction to ganja, had a lean and emaciated body. Under instructions from Mark Sanjeev Rao, Kanda and Kini raised Dwarkadas by the armpit, one on each side. He was easily lifted up. Mark Sanjeev Rao, with lantern in hand, became the leader. With his usual swinging gait and long strides, he walked in front, lantern in hand, and two friends at the back carried the bent, frail figure of Dwarkadas, lifting him right above the ground. Ramdas watched the procession. He was taken near upon, and the business over, in the same style, pomp, and circumstance, he was carried back to his bed. Mark Sanjeev Rao, after parting word of advice coupled with a warning and a threat not to make any more horrible noises, retired along with the others to rest. Pura Anand used to have always discussions over religious beliefs and practices with Kanda, who was his chum and of the same age. The outer veranda of the ashram had a screen on one side made of palm leaves. The screen was fixed at a distance of about 1 foot from the edge of the veranda, leaving a dark gap in between. One day, Pura Anand, sitting at this edge of the veranda, was with great enthusiasm exhibiting to Kanda the various modes of asana. In the process, his back being turned towards the enclosure, he slipped backwards. The result was he tumbled down into the dark gap. His two legs and hands alone were seen shooting outwards. There was a hue and a cry. None could resist roaring with laughter at the ludicrous situation into which our yogic aspirant had fallen. Kanda, who was a stout and strong man, stepped forward and pulling him out both by the legs and hands, put him the question, "What do you call this asana?" One day, Puranan and Ramdas were alone in the ashram and they were sitting on the veranda. Now, Puranan's son, a young man, dropped in. Coming before Ramdas, he squatted facing him. He said, "I have come to teach you, if you would consent to become my disciple." Ramdas replied, "Ramdas is your humblest disciple and would be highly grateful to you if you could teach him." Ramdas awaited his reply in an attitude of perfect humility. All the time, Pura Anand was fuming with rage at the behavior of his son. But Ramdas signed him to keep quiet. The son proceeded, "You have to know that the world is the manifestation of Ram. He dwells in all beings, creatures, and things. This vision you have to attain if you aspire for absolute liberation. Do you understand?" "Yes, by your grace," Ramdas replied. Pura Anand was controlling himself from dancing with fury and curbing his tongue from hurling curses on his son. No more questions were asked. There was a silence for some time. Then the son spoke again. "Swamiji, I have a question to ask you." "What is it, Ramji?" Ramdas said. "You see, in the nights when I sit up for meditation, my mind wanders. Can you prescribe a method by which I can have steady concentration and meditation?" "Ram, you are simply wonderful. Have you forgotten that you are the Guru of Ramdas who has come to teach him what he does not know, viz. about God realization? Whence is this question about the restless mind and all that? You are veritably Ram himself." "No, no," he impatiently cried out. "I am not Ram. I am Ravana. Hit me so that I may behave better." Saying this, he laid his head on the feet of Ramdas, and when Ramdas raised him, found that the friend's face was wet with tears. Soon after he left, Ramdas later learnt from Pura Anand that his son had a bet with his friends in the bazaar that they should stand him a treat in a tiffin shop if he succeeded in making Ramdas angry, and if he failed, he would stand them a treat instead. Poor friend, he lost the bet. Folks, let's see continuation in the next chapter. Thank you. Bye bye. Rama Rama Pupodu.